Thank you for being here. My name is Beitula, and this is Shooting from the Hip. I appreciate you being here. Please keep in mind what we are doing here on Bet On It Shooting from the Hip. We explore human ideas, philosophies, and noteworthy information. This exploration is us thinking aloud, a thought exercise, if you will. Jumping into ideas and examining them and then re-examining them. You will find we're prone to using adult language when expressing opinions. In keeping with that, you shouldn't believe anything we say. We are not experts of any kind. We are just having fun with these ideas, philosophies, and information in the hopes that you will find it fun, interesting, and entertaining. We encourage you to invest time in searching out these subjects and coming to your own conclusions. Now, on with the shit show. Slim, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Beautiful day. Although I was hoping for a little more sun, but the cloud cover works. Having said that, I guess we're just going to jump right in. Off camera, we were talking about the subject indirectly, so we're going to touch on that again on camera. But today's episode is about cults and cultural hegemony. Now, we'll start by defining not each of those terms, but we'll define what a cult is, and then we'll see if there's any relationship with the way that we organize in a society. And what you will find throughout the course of the conversation that is in fact true. The way we organize our society, you could say that we are cultists, all the individual members that make up society that are nestled inside one cult, which is nestled inside another one, and which is inside of another one, inside of another one, inside of another one. So it's cult. It's like those Chinese, no, it's not Chinese, Russian nesting dolls.
Okay.
Right? So it speaks to the way that we're molded as a result of like adhering to the cultural narrative, the nationalism, the education we're exposed to, the things we use to entertain us. All of these things, in greater or lesser degrees, are cult-like, right? If not out-and-out cults.
Yeah, it almost sounded like earlier you were describing groups, just smaller and smaller.
Right.
Groups.
That's all it is. So it doesn't matter what scale you're looking at. So if it's a nation, and then within the nation, there's individual provinces or states or regions, and within those regions, then there's even smaller organizations, and all of them could be seen as being cult-like. So let's start with the definition of a cult. So it's a noun, it's person, place, or thing. So in this case, it's a thing. It's a system of religious veneration or devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. A relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange and sinister. Now, that isn't the only definition for a cult, but it's the one that's most commonly used, right? Because they tend to organize in a very quasi-religious kind of fashion. And in fact, lots of them are based on much larger religious institutions, which in and of themselves could be seen as cults. It wouldn't be inaccurate to say that. Now, having said that, I'm sure it's going to trigger a bunch of people, but the reality is that the requirements of a cult are the same that you'll see in conventional religions, although it's the degree of how extremely they adhere to whatever guidelines for that particular cult. Now, with more mainstream conventional religions, there's a lot of flexibility. Within much smaller cults, they're very inflexible, right? And again, we've been exposed to it through the legacy media, where you hear about cults, Branch Davidians, David Koresh's cult. You know what I'm talking about? Waco, Texas.
I've heard of that one. I'm not super familiar with it. I've heard of Jonestown. Like,
Yeah, so all of these are like where you have examples of an extremely charismatic leader now who essentially forces everyone to adhere to his guidelines, and typically they will base theirs on more conventional religions. They'll borrow from that, or they'll out and out use the mainstream religion uh, to to generate the basic ideology of their cult. Right? Does that make sense? What I said so far?
yeah, like in some ways, people could suggest they're like reincarnations of certain prophets. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody claiming they're God. It could be somebody claiming to have some sort of
Or
prophetic
yes,
vision.
yes, or that somehow they have a more direct uh, connection to like whatever the divine source is, right? So that sometimes, very often, you'll see that they don't claim to be like God incarnate, although there's many who do. Uh, but they're the ones who make the claim that like somehow they directly speak to the divine. So everything that they're doing has been informed and guided by a divine hand, right? So again, it's really tricky. When we start talking about this, you suddenly start. It's all too easy to draw parallels within religion, but religion's obvious. It goes much further than that. Like in the way that we organize societies, think about our societies. Very charismatic leaders driving, and that's more social and cultural. But they do the same thing. They have adherents, people who are devout followers and who promote whatever message they're promoting. And almost always, the language is like peace and love and that sort of thing, but their particular version of it. So it becomes a very biased kind of expression of things like peace and love, right?
Yeah, like an ideology is never going to be 100% perfect, but like I could see situations where the comparison between religious and also corporate figures are like the call to authority is there.
Yeah.
It's kind of you appeal to their faith. Like, oh, come on, I
Okay.
ran the company for so long.
Well,
Trust me
but
on this.
even like it's interesting you brought up corporate entities, but they they don't necessarily even have to draw their cultish kind of authority from some kind of ideology. They can do it purely based on their authority because they're the highest ranking person within the corporation.
They
So
write the paychecks.
right, so then you're going to adhere to whatever dictates they make to everybody else that's under them, right? So
There's no faith in their version, but religious structure would.
right, but there is kind of faith, but I don't know that it's like an overt like acknowledgement of faith. It's just that they have faith in the institution. The company is, you know what I mean? They believe in the company, right? So that's, again, can be very tricky. So this idea of faithfulness will allow adherents then to prostrate themselves in front of whatever figure is the leader, right? So, and it doesn't matter, like, again, because I don't want it to sound like we're picking on religious institutions or a
Right.
quasi-religious institution. It's at work in virtually
Yeah,
any
actually,
kind of organization you can imagine.
if I could give an example on an individual scale, in order to question like this dogmatic structure top down, you would have to question every choice that led you to get there and stay there and work for them. So you're kind of acting against yourself.
Remember, it's far easier to just follow the directions, follow the instructions, and not think for yourself, right? I think that becomes a significant part of it, right? That it's dependent on the followers following, right? And again, it gives rise to like the expression of blind faith, unquestioning faith, and I'm not sure that that's entirely healthy. I think it's often used to mislead people, to lead them astray. Uh, you want somebody to do something horrible, you just have to convince them that it's in their best interest through their ideology. That's why individuals strap bombs to their chest and and detonate them, to send a message, or take lives in the name of their ideology, right? Where you go, wait a minute, I thought it was an ideology of peace and love. So it's clearly like a disconnect, right? But again, it speaks to the kind of influence and control that cults or cult-like ideologies can have on individuals. So in the name of the organization or the institution, people are capable of justifying horrible actions.
Yeah, like in the name of security, we we just rely on this larger grouping to take care of us.
Right, the small minority, again, maybe who are authoritarian.
That could be like corporate structure,
And
family structure.
it can be anything, right? So that here's the thing: even though the definition that the dictionary often gives for cults is that somehow they're equated to religions. Well, then, by extension, all that includes all religions. But I don't think it's exclusive to faith-based ideologies. It can also be a part of political ideologies. Cultural ideologies could be seen as being cult-like.
Yeah.
Right, so it's not an inaccuracy then to refer to virtually anything as being like a cult. So having said that, if you look for a more broader or deeper definition, the term's often we understand it's often applied to religious movements, but again also social groups, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So so far. It's kind of clear where we're going with this, and all I'm trying to do is point out. Remember, this was the conversation we had off camera that led into us setting up to record this episode. This idea that these things, these institutions that we hold in high regard, are influencing us at the individual level. It just gets reduced to the matter of degree of which it influences you, and then as a result of that, or what's the result of that, at least at the individual level, which we'll get more deeply into as the conversation goes on. But I don't want to lose. I do want to talk about the characteristics of cults and further the definition. So. Whether it's a social group or a political ideology or a national identity, if it's cult-like, it's usually and often extreme, right? And almost always has some form of ritual associated with it, so that you prostrating yourself, so it becomes a physical expression of your devotion to the ideology of the cult. And remember, again, they typically are pretty extreme in the way in their worldviews or their view of themselves and the rest of the world at large, right? So, because go ahead.
So you can't just buy a T-shirt and be a gang?
Something like that. Yeah. So it's a system or group of people who practice excessive devotion, often to a figurehead or an object or the belief system itself. So that's why it can being in a cult suddenly crosses a whole. It's not the obvious thing, purely religion. It's applicable to virtually any way of organizing, right? So, and at the tip of the spearhead is always a charismatic leader of one kind or another, right? So And once the cult has gotten really, really successful and gotten a wide range of followers, and then goes mainstream, then that level of acceptance of it um, that kind of validates it on a much larger scale. So again, and again, I'm not picking on religions, please. I'm just trying to point out how they're all like that. They all fit under the definition of cult, but the mainstream religions have risen in popularity to such a degree where now they have validation because of the number of parishioners and followers. So it validates kind of that ideology, right? And the devotees, what everyone who is here listening to this, including the two of us, we've experienced or had encounters with devotees of any particular ideology, and it's super curious how they almost always, all of them invariably repeat the same, like it's the same thing. It's like they're programmed to respond in the same way, right? Like, so they all, and I don't want to get into the minutia of that stuff, but they almost always offer up something directly out of their religion, right? And their ideology to validate their ideology. So that's confirmation bias when you do that. So you're using your own ideology or biases to confirm the validity of your biases, right? So I go, that's not critical thinking. And most cults, the first thing that they want the faithful to give up, or the parishioner to give up, is any kind of critical thinking. It's adherence that becomes more important than individual determination or coming to conclusions on your own, which is something that we like always. It's always the focus of our conversations, is that no matter who's listening to it, or even amongst ourselves, the point is to kind of draw your own conclusions, figure this shit out for yourself. So if there's any truth to this, then you can look at much larger institutions, including nations, again, as being cults. And these are the characteristics of which you'll immediately start to go, like, any type of organization takes on these cult-like qualities, or something you want to say.
Yeah, I was just saying, cult is short for culture almost.
Yeah,
Like,
it
in
is.
this sense.
Yes, it is an abbreviation of culture. The
Like,
word
literally.
culture. Yes. So again, we get we get so comfortable in the language that we use that we treat what's being said. Either it's an overreaction or it's incidental, right? Oh, they're just cultists, right? Like,
like an offhand way to dismiss things.
Right. That's largely what it is. Some way of dismissing something. So, and I'm not interested in dismissing things. I'm interested in dissecting them and then seeing what's worth keeping and what's worth discarding.
Yeah,
Right?
because you can see it on both sides in the American politics. Like, going, oh, they're just woke.
Well, but even like all that finger pointing, it becomes as an ultimate distraction then, that for the real power brokers of the world, it provides them an opportunity to avoid any kind of detection, because people are too caught up in hostilities between competing ideologies. So, and again, remember, that's all an ideology is a bias. So if you're wrapped up in your bias and then you're in a heated debate and that's all you can do is lash out at your opposition, you can be easily manipulated.
Yeah, because
Right?
it really is a numbers game. If you think of, like, a large number of people who didn't necessarily, like, spend all their time dedicated on the one subject, they went over a vast amount of stuff, not really looking into it, and then they argue with the opposition. They're just pawns,
Well, and
like low-grade pawns.
right. So even in the case of what we're talking about, which is political ideologies, I don't know many human beings alive who, at least the political philosophies of the right and left, where people don't have views that kind of skirt one like a more conservative view and a more liberal view, right? Where depending on the issue, they tend to waver back and forth. I don't I They might say it, but I've never seen a pure conservative or a pure liberal.
I
They
feel like most people tend to be like
they
liberal in the traditional sense.
they identify that way. Well, but in traditional sense, like the modern day liberal has nothing to do with the liberal from 25 years ago, right? But what's weird, even more weird, is now the contemporary present day conservatives to a degree sound and feel like liberals from 25 years ago, right? So there's this weird switch that's kind of gone on, and again, I'm not entirely like I think it's largely in part like a pushback against political ideologies, period. Because remember, I've often said this, and I say this to you all the time when we talk about this sort of stuff. The problem's not having a bias. The problem is when you treat your bias as somehow preferential or more important than somebody else's bias, when ultimately it's just you expressing an opinion. That's all. You can reduce a bias to that. So, and and opinions in and of themselves kind of meaningless and empty, right?
Yeah.
Unless they're rooted in like evidence.
We have a whole episode on that. Check out subjectivity and objectivity.
Right. Well, a number of episodes. So it's come up because it's relevant.
All the time.
Right. It's relevant all the time. And it's the kind of conversation that we could be having with each other, but we don't. You would rather engage in my opinion versus your opinion, and to somehow ultimately to express that like yours is the superior opinion.
Yeah.
You go like they're just it's you. It's like you saying, the only ice cream worth eating is vanilla, and you're going to ban all other flavored ice creams. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, cults seem like the extreme where they're giving you this magical story and you get to participate in it, which makes you meaningful and special. But you also have to like give up all the agency you have.
Right. So the trade-off for safety and security and identifying with a much larger group that somehow they care about you. And remember, ultimately they don't. You're expendable, and cults do it all the time. They expend their own members to the advantage of the institution. I just described every institution on the planet, right? They'll expend the individual members if it's in the best interest of the institution. Right. So even though all the institutions, including cults, all of them, everything that we just previously discussed, all of these institutions act out of self-interest. They need the membership, but when it's convenient, they'll use them in whatever way suits their needs.
Like on a meta scale, this is just kind of greedy behavior you can see in just about every infrastructure, or not infrastructure.
Institution. Yeah.
Thank you. Like, you can see the same thing in nature. Something has to eat something else to thrive, but there's symbiotic relationships you don't see in these cults because they're 100% trying to drain one end to give it to the top.
That's right. So, like in the natural world, even though some people, especially people who are extremely sensitive, don't like the idea of killing or things dying and that sort of thing, survival of the fittest is a function that's designed in the natural world to prevent predators and prey from overwhelming the natural environment, because it keeps everything in balance. It's a check and balance system, which you don't get within institutions. And to your point, all the institutions are top heavy in the sense that those at the top are favored primarily over those at the bottom, and those at the bottom are almost always seen as being expendable. Doubt me, we've had 2 fucking world wars. What the fuck? What else do you need to hear? The cult of communism, right? Don't be confused. They're fucking cultists. And you doubt me? You think about what Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge did to the Cambodian people, Joseph Stalin to the Russians, and Mao to the Chinese. And it was all to further their agenda and their ideas. And they wasted human lives. Like, I'm not squeamish about death and dying, but the idea that now you're gonna basically sacrifice people for like needless deaths. To me, I take exception with that. Like, if it's avoidable, you shouldn't go out of your way to do it. It's going to happen as a natural course of things. But the fact that that in their own ideology, they come to the conclusion that somehow it better serves them by eliminating certain numbers, or they can offer up some kind of justification to excuse the worst of their behaviors.
Yeah, in every situation, if you're focused on one metric, more followers, or you need more money for your nation, or you need more people voting for your side, eventually using one single metric will make you prioritize that metric over things that you might need, like sustainability,
Right,
like integrity of the base you already have.
right,
Because like a thorough religion isn't about, give me your money, believe in what I tell you. I say good religion as in something that benefits you long term. It's a slow burn where it's like, yeah, we might ask for donations and you come every Sunday, but we give you behaviors that benefit you. Religions do have that thing where it's like, no matter what, any ideology, if you 100% believe in it, you can't just use it to benefit your life. You are in the cult. You have to push it onto, not necessarily push it onto others, but
that's what they end up doing. But they do it, and again, it's the method in which they do it.
But the
so in your best, because they sell it by. Nobody would respond to if they're going, here, I need X amount of human sacrifices to make this work. So who's willing to die for the cause, right?
Yeah, who's willing to give $100 every year?
Yeah, everybody would take a step back. Okay, all of those in favor, step forward, and you'd see everybody take a step back. I mean,
but in my mind, if you're able to go by the metric, like, oh, it's not just faith that I want to have economic stability. You won't make huge donations to this thing just to get a benefit in your own faith. Like this thing.
But again, everything. This is like everything that we just alluded to in terms of politics is crossing over into cultural hegemony. But again, cult, right? So, and we're talking about a small minority influencing a large majority, and for the advantage of that small minority. Look, every form of organization has elitists, has those, they establish a hierarchy, and there are those who are at the top of that hierarchy who dictate to everybody at the bottom. So I would go so far as to say that's why it's important not to take those things seriously, not to assign any kind of meaningful value to those things. That you accept them as part of the way that you organize, and their ideas that you tend to be fond of, but you don't have a dog in the fight. You're not willing to kill people over a difference in your cult views, right? Or cultural views.
So it's speaking for like religious practices. People would check out multiple different ideologies. They wouldn't just focus on one and build it up.
Right, because ultimately, look, most people I know who are born into a religious identity, most of them never question being in that religious identity. They just accept it. Most of them aren't even really aren't really religious. They follow through the tradition. My parents did it, so I do it. So they're not even necessarily religious. Or liberal or conservative. They vote liberal and conservative because their parents did, so then it becomes this tradition that they adhere to. I forget where I was going with all. Bail me out.
Well, it's a great. I think you brought up really well. Like traditions aren't necessarily anything wrong.
Oh, right, right. The point I was ultimately trying to make is that it's fine, but you can't treat it with the utmost importance, right? The moment you do, now you run the risk of very serious hostility. It's not no longer like it's, and especially if you're an extremist in your view, right? Like I go, what would possess you, anyone, to want to be an extremist, right? So, but it's blind devotion to whatever it is that they think that they're doing, and they think that their position is not just the right position, is the only position, right? So that becomes the danger of like treating whatever ideology you adhere to as being primary, as more important than the obvious fact that we're all human, we're all here together at this particular moment in time. So that connection speaks to the fact that like that we are one, right? Now I know that there are many who would just dismiss and laugh that off as like some kind of like simplistic view of the state of that we're in. But I'm like, you can't ignore the fact that we're all here at this one particular moment in time, and we you can be aware of that, and in that awareness you go like, here we're connected to each other. And so if we have a huge negative effect on a portion of humanity, it'll resonate throughout the rest of humanity. So if we exercise an enormous negative effect for personal advantage for a preferred ideology at the expense of the environment, then it doesn't just affect. It's not just a negative effect on the environment. It suddenly affects everyone in the most negative way. So, and I'm not weighing in on climate change or anything like that. We live on a planet that goes through enormous cycles that are far greater in time duration than any one of us can live, and we only have an inkling of what possibly goes on in terms of cycles, right? That there's cycles to the planet that last tens of thousands of years. I look at the what do they call it? The Great Year. It's 26,000 years, and that the amount of time it takes for us to orbit the center of the galaxy. I go like, these are scales that you're never going to see in your lifetime, but yet somehow we impart some kind of importance on the fact that we're here, that we're supposed to be dominating it all. And when you go like, when you do that, it might be at the risk of something else. So it's reckless, and you're not aware of the consequences of your own actions, which if you applied a little bit of critical thinking and objectivity, you could see where the choices you make, what they might potentially lead to. And then instead of acting in a thoughtful way to mitigate or circumnavigate a negative outcome, we just charge in with complete disregard to how this will affect everyone except ourselves, right? So it's this single-mindedness that somehow that preference or bias is more important than anything else. And isn't that what it's a very, very nature of cults, right? So I hope I didn't get too far away from the subject. Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, I was just listening.
Okay, find it interesting, or just go like, this guy's nuts.
No, I just woke up from a nap. Sorry.
Oh, damn. You're a horrible guest host.
Guest host. Well, no, I definitely like the idea that this applies just about in every level, because we can see it in the daily approach. There's ways you can focus on yourself it's like positive to what your goal is, and it'll help you find better goals.
Yeah, I
so
agree.
You're incrementally changing your perspective, your methodology.
But it's also a thoughtfulness and a mindfulness like that, so that as you're interacting with the environment that at any particular moment that you're aware of it, that you're aware of your impact on it. So how much you're impacting other individuals, uh, in the situations you may find yourself in, that how much of an effect you can have on those. And again, the effect is either beneficial or negative, right? So, and again, I think any kind of cult-like view skews the ability to do that. So then what you do is you favor the bias or the opinion or the prejudice or the preference or however you want to
Yeah.
identify those things as being more important, and then it's what potentially leads us astray, right?
It's a huge subject because it involves your identity, your agency.
Right. Right. So again, none of it's the because it's part of the the nature of the conversations we have. None of this stuff. It's all deep dives, and you got to get comfortable swimming in really deep water, right? So which can be a bit intimidating. A lot of people just want to live on the surface because there's a degree of comfort in not having to pay attention, just walk through life and just do all the things they like to do, and that's what makes them happy. But they're also the same people who have high stress and anxiety and suffer as a result of that because they're unwilling to take the deep dive. And just to be clear, everybody has the capacity to do this, right? So it's not for like gifted intellectuals. They're the ones who are most often led astray by themselves. So intelligence shouldn't be measured as a result of like devotion to any particular ideology or education that you may or may not have. Intelligence is your ability to be discerning, right?
Yeah, the idea of perspective and how you can change it through changing your lifestyle. It really does change little by little, but I don't know how to explain it. Like the incremental steps you change your perspective. So the whole meta process is rewarding in some sense because you learn to overcome things.
Right, but it shouldn't be restrained with a time limit or hampered with a time limit. It's the kind of thing that you're in the perfect sense that you would do for the entirety or the entire duration of a lifetime. That like you're not going to just do it now for the next 6 months and suddenly everything's good and you're going to go right back to what you did before. There's no long-term growth in that. The long-term growth is when you go, this is a never-ending journey, right? It ends when you're 6 feet under. When you expire, that's when the journey comes to a close. That's when the growth and evolution or revolution of the individual, the transformation of the individual, it should take an entire lifetime. So you shouldn't be in a hurry, but you should always be present and mindful and working towards that. That should always be
So kind of like building on each skill when you can, as you can.
right.
And every moment grants you some opportunity.
Right. Or the alternative is you can just adhere to the ideas of any cult, subscribe to any authority, do as you're told, but it is probably the most unsatisfying way to exist, right? Because you never address the great any greater ideas, like those existential ideas, like what does it mean? Why are we here? What is it to be here? What is here? Right? So those are the kind of questions that can fuel you for a lifetime in the pursuit of the answer. Remember, it's not the answer that enlightens. It's the question.
Right, because if you're spoon fed, it takes out the adventure in it.
Right.
You can have the words on a piece of paper, but the meaning behind it doesn't really hit till whenever you discover it.
Right, that it becomes a personal discovery. That's why I advocate for the idea that, like, here, you apply this methodology, but you ultimately determine how this plays out. And that's the point. The point is you're supposed to you're supposed to figure it out as you're going.
Yeah, cults 100% rob you of that.
Right. So again, so actually that's a great segue into the characteristics of a cult. So there's 5 that are recognized, right? Like, so isolating members and preventing and punishing members for leaving, right? So whether it's reduced to just simple shaming them, to out and out like physically restraining them. Thanks for your interruption. It's very appreciated, jackass. Number 2 is seeking inappropriate loyalty to their leaders. Well, think about the orange orangutan to the south of us in the glorious United States of America. This is a guy that, you know, inspired such loyalty, and now everyone's kind of shocked by the way he's conducting himself, right? I'm going, wait a minute. It might be a result of the fact that you didn't take the time out to go, hey, what are your intentions? What exactly are you going to do? And what does that mean to us? Nobody ever stopped it. They were all just caught up in, like, you know, in the fanfare and, like, you know, you got to be loyal to the nation and stuff. Look, I've made it perfectly clear. Like, as far as I'm concerned, nations are, again, the ultimate expression of a cult, right? Like,
yeah, because the big promise is like, oh, we're gonna make this better, that better. They don't tell you how.
Yeah, I'm going, wait a minute. For many of us, we live in resource-rich lands, which are legally laid claim to by corporate interests, private interests, and then resold. You know, they're harvested and then resold to us, the general membership. When, if you're going to talk to me about nationalism and how valuable the country is, and this is being Canada, I go, how come we don't benefit directly from all the natural resources in this country? Because if we did, then every individual, none of them would ever be concerned with personal finances, and there would be no fucking homeless people, right? Fuck you. All this resource-rich land, if we resold for resale, made it available to other nations, everybody in Canada could live like millionaires. But then immediately you'll get the crazies going, you're a communist. I go, what communist wants to make everybody independently wealthy? I go, fuck you, right? Fucking morons, right? So again, I might be speaking out of turn, but in the way that we manage and the way the administrators operate and run the country won't allow for us individually. Because ultimately, if you suddenly, because a lot of people have purposeless existences. I'm like going, well, actually, if you had access to all those resources, then all education would be free. Why would you need to charge for it? And then the infrastructure would revolve around greater institutions of learning for the purposes of learning, for broadening the individual, right? So then we become you could set a new global standard. Canada didn't come into this reality the way it is currently. It evolved into this. So who's to say that we can't direct its evolution into becoming something more supportive for the individual membership? But how the fuck are you going to do that? Well, first of all, that requires the individual memberships to stop being cultists. So this goes back to the conversation in the last episode, that you have to become master of the Holy Trinity, mind, body, and spirit. That's an individual mission. That's a private purpose. That if everybody actively pursued it, then the nation would have to respond. It would have to evolve to meet that.
Right, which includes criticizing all sides.
Right. So then suddenly we go, where's your evidence? We always ask, first question, evidence. If you're going to make any claims, you have to present irrefutable evidence to support that claim. Otherwise, then it's just a speculation, which we'll entertain, but I'm not putting stock in that. I want evidence.
Yeah, like, not to like go too far into the political aspect of it, but in Canada, it's pretty standard. You show what you're gonna do, like the methodology, and then you don't do it. But, you know, you at least suggest you're going to do it in a way that's beneficial to the community. Doesn't have as many you know flies in the oil, or what was it, flies in the ointment?
Ointment, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm because
Here's an example. So you have a politician. He keeps going, "Oh, I have a solution. There's a lot of flies in the ointment, though." He keeps doing that. You're gonna start going, "Who are you buying ointments from? Like, fucking figure it out." But we don't do that.
really did get far away from characteristics of cults, but in the most interesting way, this idea of like loyalty to the leaders, right? And I hear it all the time from people who are arguing their political positions, right? And I go, has any politician honored their word and actually acted on behalf of the general membership? You know, outside of servicing themselves and those that they're connected with first. Right? And our history's replete with it. You don't need to take my word for it to go, oh, he's just a contrarian, he's just looking to, cause shit, stir the pot. Maybe. But but no one can argue the fact that in all political history that politicians have not behaved in the poorest possible way, and yet somehow you're convinced that every time you go to vote, this time is going to be better than the last time. So talk about a cultist mentality.
Yeah,
right?
All throughout history, there's this idea that, if we have more gains on top of more gains, we're always going to be good and doing better. The idea of outpacing the competitor, it's gone to a point where, like, it should be obvious that at some point they're going to expedite the metric they want.
Right.
Like, if it's communism, it's going to be, the social stronghold they
but
have.
That it only in word, because the hierarchy, those at the top of the hierarchy, that doesn't include them. They have the best of everything. They still get access to the best of everything, but at the bottom you get whatever's available. And I'm like going, wait a minute, it's this kind of stupidity, right? And I'm not talking about communism. Remember, ultimately, I prefer capitalism. I like the idea that like you could create something, and as a result of creating it, generate personal income and revenue. And so I'm all for free markets, but we don't live in that anymore, and everyone's super deluded because they all think that somehow this is capitalism as it should be. It's not. It's crony capitalism. It services now again those who benefit the most from it. And then the excuse they offer is you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps or some ridiculous fucking notion like that, right? When they all have been, largely their advantages come from generational wealth.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when it's a monopoly from like, some 1800s family, like that's even relatively recent.
And so again, within the context of a nation, those families end up becoming like cult leaders, right? Because somehow they know best, because they have all the wealth. And I'm like going, and then, like you said, that in the face of that evolution, then it no longer is free market capitalism. Now it becomes monopolies, right? Well, that's not capitalism anymore, right? They have a word in the English language for that kind of centralization. It's called fascism, right? So, but it's a soft form of fascism, because World War I and II, even though they were basically inbred in family fighting, World War II demonstrated that if you're going to try and physically impose an ideology on the rest of the world, you're going to be Rome, or you're going to be the National Socialists of Germany. Soon as you start organizing like that and applying it, you're going to generate lots of enemies. And that is not what World War II was. The rest of the world rose up to defy this one enemy, that who on paper probably should have won World War II.
Yeah, I'm thinking, regardless of the isms, there's always, like, human behavior is always going to be represented in the larger thing. Like, when it comes to this stuff, I try to characterize it as like we're all some descendants of an animal. I assume ape, Some of us
Maybe
are
not.
dogs.
We can't. Again, we can't say that with certainty. But the ones who come from dogs, you absolutely know them.
Yeah, these guys are.
They're always peeing on lampposts and scratching behind their ears.
Yeah, I was gonna give other examples. Like, there's characterizations of just like rabid animals, and these people aren't gonna be very nice. They're gonna be tyrants, regardless of what structure they're in.
Right, right. So that's what it breeds. It breeds tyranny, right? So, and again, our history's demonstrated this to be true. Like you can argue with me the minutia details of it, but ultimately, in the most broadest strokes, that's what happens. It's some form of elitism, right? Charismatic leader, whether they're out and out tyrant, based on any kind of political ideology, doesn't matter. They take the shape of a cult.
Yeah.
Right? And then us who are the majority, we could overturn them in a heartbeat that freaking fast, but we become adherents, right? We become sycophants. We do as we're told, right? And I'm like, and here I'm advocating for you, like here, discover what you really are.
Right, adaptable, self-sufficient. Like these things aren't easy to pry on or prey on.
Right, and individuals like that, you can't control them. You can't control self-actualized, self-realized individuals whose chief motivation is the realization of their own potential. Those are the kind of people that you can't manipulate a person like that. And if you have a society of people like that, they're the ones who are dictating the conditions of society, and then all the politicians become purely administrators. They're fucking office workers. Fuck them, right? And I've never apologized for the way I view politicians and politics. They're all filthy fucking liars, and they only work to their own advantage. And if you think otherwise, again, it's because you're deluded, because you're a cultist.
Yeah, there's always an issue if somebody's yelling at the cashier. It's like, man, they don't make the policies. You're never allowed to yell at the right person.
Right. So the face of any corporation is just an average person who's just trying to get by and trying to make a living. And then people get sour and lose it on them. I think it might be the wrong person, right? I don't see them going down to City Hall and doing that stuff, which would make more sense. Where should you be directing your derision? Like, how about at the frickin' politicians?
If everybody knew their mayor by name and knew why they did or did not like them, and you're always going to find things you don't like about any politician, because every choice is it's a this for that situation. You're not always going to have a winner.
Yeah, I agree.
But like, if we're involved in local elections, that's very important. There's a huge percentage of people that aren't.
Well, again, because they shut down, they get turned off by stuff, that sort of thing. So,
or they get way into the ideology.
Yeah, and so again, not beneficial. It's not beneficial. What's beneficial is to realize it. The revolution, evolution, transformation of the individual, but dictated by the individual, right? So I just want to quickly run through the list of characteristics of cults, and then we can see like how that.
I'm on the first page.
Yeah, I'm still on the first page. So number one is isolating members and preventing and punishing members from leaving, right? So from the mildest form of shaming to like out and out like physically restraining them, to seeking inappropriate loyalty to their leadership and the leaders or the charismatic leader. 3, dishonoring the family unit. Right, that somehow that basic unit is now not of value, right? But so in most religions that they tout that as being important, like the integrity of the family. And I come from a family that's has a strong interconnectedness. Even though I didn't experience that when I tried to create a family, my family dissolved, but the family that I was raised in, it was a strong family unit. And as a result of that, I'd like to think that it was beneficial, right? Again, could be way off, but I think typically any kind of familial connection in terms of like that that you can depend on the individuals, that they're there for that you're there for each other. I think those are enormously beneficial.
Yeah, and when this cult strips you of your roles and then tells you it has to be their specific role they
Yeah,
give to you.
they're the father. Like the charismatic leader becomes the father of the fan of everyone, right?
Right, and it's this absurd idea like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with the sense that I'm not safe, and then they have this charismatic leader. I'm gonna help, father figure type typically, and it Jonestown happens.
Right.
It's not necessarily always good to put your eggs in all one basket.
Yeah, man, because again, the outcome can be horrible and horrific. Number 4 is the absolute authoritarianism without meaningful accountability. So no leader, they should always be concerned about how any of the membership will respond to anything they do. In fact, they should fear it, because that will keep them in check. Going, here, if I piss them off, they're going to lynch me. They're going to hang. I'm going to be swinging by a rope.
It could be in every minute action, because oh, he has a good word with the big guy, so the big guy in the sky. So I don't want to piss him off. Every action.
Right. So again, accountability becomes really important, or another way of saying being responsible. And we've discussed this at length too. The idea that, like, here, ultimately, you have to be responsible for you. Oh my God, butterfly. So in terms of like the characteristics of cults, we've already kind of really well established, like that an authoritarianism is required within the leadership of the cult, and again, that should be self-explanatory how dangerous that is, right? Tyrants, tyranny, Joseph Stalin murdering millions, right? Like, the funny thing is, communists have murdered more other members than fascists ever did of those that they deemed lesser than themselves. So you tell me, right? And number 5 is no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. And what did we say in the opening or early on? Is that critical thinking and observation are like primary. They're the most important thing an individual can do. But that's the first thing that being an adherent to any ideology, it's the first thing you disregard, right? And you go, that again, I can't believe that I have to say this, that you can't see the dangers inherent in that, like that, why that's so fucking bad, right?
Yeah, like we talked before about how the fear response is like the worst response you can have, especially if you're in a dangerous situation.
Right.
But out of fear, it really keeps you in check. Not necessarily outwards tyranny, like you say, but
And it's also the most primal of emotions, so it's really hard to keep it in check. It's not impossible, but you can see where it's a powerful motivator. And those who are like authoritarians or tyrants or dubious leaders lean on that as leverage against everybody else, right? Right. That's how they lever everybody into compliance, right?
Yeah, I had the idea of what's her name? Can't remember her name. This one lady in Mean Girls, she was the main girl.
I know the movie, but I watched it when my kids were little, and my kids are adults now, so I haven't.
Classic movie. But yeah, she dismisses her one friend. Well, friend. I'm doing air quotes now. She's like, "Oh, nobody says that anymore." When the one lady says, some phrase, and the idea of that small social poke is enough to like make her visibly upset.
And again, what a way to control somebody, right?
Yeah.
You shame them into submission. Oh, if you want to hang out with us, you can't. Isn't what the cultists do. You got to be like us. That means you got to talk like us, walk like us, look like us. I'm going, wait.
And she's helping you by telling you what to do. That's not help.
That's authoritarianism. That's dictation from a dictator, and let me emphasize dick, right? Like, not the good one.
Yeah. Bad tyrants.
Right. So all of this. Okay. So ultimately, all of this, according to Wikipedia, can fall under the idea of a cult of personality, right? So the cult of personality, or the cult of the leader, is the result of an effort which is made to create and idealize and even a heroic image of a glorious leader, often through unquestioning flattery and praise, right? That, oh, the great leader, look, isn't this what goes on in North Korea? And we laugh because they're obvious about it, right? But you go, wait, in a more subtle way, we do the very same thing. What do you think? Why do you think we have celebrity stars?
Oh yeah, Hollywood's one big.
Right. So a giant cult of personality. Right. So historically, it has been developed through techniques. Let me try that again in English.
Amalgamation.
No. Techniques such as manipulation of mass media, dissemination of propaganda, staging of spectacles, manipulation of the arts, instilling of a sense of patriotism, and government organized demonstrations and rallies. Well, everything that I just read, we've seen just within the last couple of years, right? So again, the dangers, everybody should be aware of the dangers of this. And everyone needs to know that here, you need to be extremely discerning when you're being presented with stuff that's being presented to you or as facts, right? Just because an authoritarian is saying these are the facts, this is good science. Well, good science is about replacing bad ideas with good ideas, and that whatever claims are being made, that you can reproduce those claims completely separated from whomever's presenting the idea of those claims, right? So you can validate whatever claims they're making independently of the person making the claims, right? Which, again, that's critical objective thinking, which seems to be in short supply. And I'm like, that's the thing that you should favor so when we talk about mind and mind, body, and spirit, that you train so that you can be critical and objective in your thinking, in the way that you look at everything. So you're observational. You're not prejudiced, but when you're looking at anything, you come at it with a clean slate, an open mind. And you go, here, what are the discernible facts? And it requires multiple sources, so you're not dependent on a single source, right? Which is essentially always what those in authority and control, who are trying to be controlling, want. That they are the only source that you should be listening to, right? Everybody else is trying to mislead you.
Yeah, it would definitely be a benefit if people noticed both sides of, again, back to politics. Both sides kind of do the same shit, just different methods, and they make it seem a little different. Like when you listed the issues that were going on recently, there's an argument both sides done that. It doesn't help.
Yeah, it's a shit tactic when you're attempting to manipulate the opposition. I go, the fact that that's the tool that you want to use to try and to influence people to support your position.
Yeah,
it's a slippery slope. You're already in a bad place.
There was a funny example where a company put out a product and another company put out a similar product. I think it's the Coke versus Pepsi thing, and they were owned by the same company at the time. So it was just like...
Yeah, can you imagine, right? So it gives everyone a sense that there's choice. But it's like politics. On the surface, it may seem like that you're given clear choices in leadership, but ultimately they all do the same thing. So how much of a choice is it really?
Right. You gotta pick your burden and ideology, but you don't know what you're walking into.
Right, so then you look at the orangutan to the south of us, and this isn't somebody who's interested in deification, because George Washington, he went through a apotheosis, like where they basically like have you ever seen the interior of that ceiling painting in the White House, in the dome, the White House, and George Washington is sitting on a throne. He's got like a robe, in that classical way that they envision, like the Divine Father. They basically painted him into that position. So here's the thing: he put his pants on one leg at a time.
Yeah.
He had to defecate and urinate, and he had to eat. So he's not any different than you and me. The difference is that somehow that those who came after him elevated him to this like a quasi divine status, so that they go here, like that it's rooted in something in their ideology.
Yeah, like they put gold on him and these nice robes. His teeth weren't his teeth. Like they had to replace him.
So somebody like that is worth noting because of what they did and because of the type of person they were. So the only thing that you should draw from that is you can use that as an inspiration to become a yourself, regardless of your failings and your limitations, right? That's why when we did that Bruce Lee episode, I focused on I didn't really go to my way to focus on it, but I mentioned like his failings as an individual. I go, that's what humanizes him. That's what makes him relatable to the rest of us. So then when you look at it in that context, then all the things he accomplished, suddenly that means you could accomplish those very same things. That you, the individual, could rise to that level of accomplishment in a personal way. That, but we don't. What do? We fucking turn him into like a quasi-deity. It's the only time I ever wanted to punch out somebody when they said to me, like, Bruce Lee's my God. I'm like, wow, you really don't get it. You really don't get it.
I was gonna say the opposite is true, where you can deify or demonize something.
You don't need to deify them or demonize them.
They're human.
Right. And you see them for what they are. So when you deify them or you demonize them, again, you're exercising bias, preference, and prejudice. Right? But no one ever told us that. I'm not prejudiced. I don't have a prejudice bone in my body. But fuck that motherfucker, because he's fucking less than me. I go, well, where's this non-prejudice, right? Like, again, it's not nearly as dramatic as wearing a hood with, the eye holes burnt out and stuff like that, because that's done for dramatic effect, right? It's way more subtle. It's insidious. We don't think that we're guilty of it because we're not paying attention to our own behaviors, right? Yeah. Because again, the way we identify with this group of we're enlightened. We look after each other. We care. Patriotism. We're all in this together.
Yeah, like you're supposed to put on your thinking cap. People don't necessarily think, oh, what kind of cap am I putting on now? Like as a joke, we probably should have put like a super strange hat on you, just to be like, oh. To play fun, I'm gonna look like a religious figure and give this speech about.
Well, wait a minute! Didn't you just describe the Pope? Wears a tall cap, or the long robes, carries his big stick. I mean, like, again,
compensating.
But it's part of the pomp and circumstance, the ritual of that leadership, that somehow they're supposed to be revered. When you go, he's just another human being. Not only is he just another human being, that means he's as flawed as we are. So, again, the danger of turning anyone into a quasi-religious figure or a cultish leader, the danger should be obvious. But none of us ever stop to consider that like, here, this could be a very serious problem, right? Because we favor our bias and our preference, which you don't have to. You were trained that's something you were trained to do, right? And as a result of that training, social conditioning, or another way of saying brainwashing, right? That That's what the cults do. What do they do to the individual membership? What does any institution do to the individual membership that they require to prop the institution up? Well, they need faithful devotees, right? And the only thing I have faith in, I don't. I often say this all the time. I believe in nothing. That's not true. I believe in myself. I believe that I can be the very best of what I can be. So, and it gives me lots of room to fail, right? But I keep striving to be the best that I can be. So I believe in that. But that's the only thing I really believe in. I don't assign faith or value to virtually anything other than, hey, does it contribute to elevating the individual? Then it's valuable. But the moment that it no longer does that, or only does that for a select few, it's not valuable, right? So brainwashing is this controversial idea that human minds can be altered or controlled against a person's will by manipulative psychological techniques, and we know this to be true. We've seen this throughout our history, and I don't understand why it's considered controversial. Like, think about all the goose steppers, hardcore Nazi believers. They were believers, right? They believed in their ideology. They adhered to the leadership, to their great grand poobah, and followed that authoritarian directive to horrible outcomes.
People will do it on their own justifications. Like, you can think of people watching soccer and then there's a riot.
There you go, another bias, right? Where it's a breakdown of any kind of critical thinking, and then the individuals themselves basically get lost in that group mind, mob mentality, right? So again, because they're washed up, or not washed up, caught up in their loyalty towards their football team.
Right, and the football team doesn't even want them to destroy the city.
Oh, or they destroy the stadium. Great.
Yeah.
So again, it just speaks to like how well conditioned we are, and you shouldn't be confused. Being well conditioned is another way of saying being brainwashed, where now you've adopted these biases, and now you act on them. These biases inform your behavior, right? So this behavior then, this behavior can be enormously horrific, but it speaks to, again, the idea that that we're programmable as human beings. So this is the part where, when we were off camera before we started recording the episode, this is what we were discussing, that as human beings we are programmable, right? So if nothing else, this should demonstrate that to be true, right? So then, if the programming comes from external sources, the question becomes, is there something the individual can do to offset the effects of that programming? Or could you actually instigate a programming effect that allows for you to become the best of what you're capable of being?
So sort of like reviewing and refining your own agency, your own beliefs,
right.
All these things.
So that's another way of saying that now you've taken charge of the programming, since it comes from all these external sources, which are cultural, social, educational, entertainment, information, ideologies, all these things, right, that make you better at being an adherent to those ideologies. That's programming.
It's virtually every stimulus.
Well,
because like there's positive reinforcement you'll see constantly.
Right.
Too.
So then, applying those same techniques by yourself, for yourself, then does that not become like a biohack that allows for you then to elevate your individual status to be way above what you ever considered that you could achieve before?
Yeah, we talked about placebos a couple of times. I think those are very interesting. You can tell yourself in the morning, I'm going to make it a great day.
And then,
And there's effects.
right, so if this is true, then how is it achieved? Well, in the same way that brainwashing is achieved, through consistency, repetition, and that if you're bombarded by this stuff long enough, you'll become those things. And not only will you become those things, your biology will adapt to be more readily biased or preferenced or prejudiced, to reflect whatever the conditioning is, right? So then it'll inform your behavior. Then anything outside of that will you you will unconsciously look down on, that it's less than you.
Right. And if you don't, that makes you uncomfortable because you would have to question everything. If you
Right.
do that from the start, you're more apt to go, okay, wait a minute. Why am I putting on, this type of shoe when I know it's raining out? Is it just habit?
Well, I mean, that's a super simplistic kind of example, but it illustrates the point. Like, why do you do anything as an individual, which none of us ever ask? So again, so if it's all about programming, and your ultimate goal is then to master yourself and to balance mind, body, and spirit, uh, again, defined by you and then pursued actively by you to those ends, then you can self-program, you can become anything you dared imagine or envision that you could be, right? You're only limited by the way you see yourself and by the preferences that you have, right? So they're limiters that only allow for you to view things in a very narrow kind of way. Whereas if you chose to, I always close with saying you become a renegade, individualist, humanist, critical, objective thinker. That's what you could become.
Well, it's always relevant when we're talking about stuff.
Well, because everything we talk about, all this stuff is interrelated. None of this stuff exists in a bubble.
Of course.
Because the focus is us as human beings. This has been the thing that I've agonized over for basically the last 2 decades. Like, to try and to come to terms with it and understand it, but in a real meaningful way, not in like a flimsy kind of non-evidence-based kind of thinking, where now I'm just as guilty. I'm guilty of fallacious programming, like the ones that I've attempted to overcome in the course of my life, so that I could become a critical, objective thinker. And guess what? In the animated way I behave, in the antics that I have, those are all residual programming that are still lingering in the way I conduct myself. But you're always each individual you're an unfinished piece of art. You're a work in progress, right? So remember, I stated this earlier, that it's a lifetime pursuit, right? So once you have that realization, then you can become comfortable, be relaxed, and then you go, here, I'm on the road. Anything else doesn't really matter. The point is that I'm learning and growing as I go. All of us are capable of that, right? And so then you have to hijack your own programming. You have to hijack the capacity, that ability to I'm going to use the word brainwash yourself. Look, what do you think addiction is? It's a pattern of behavior that overwrites everything else. And then you become better suited biologically and psychologically to to addiction. Right? So maybe those who are in position of authority and power, they know this. They may not even know this intellectually. They know it intuitively. And that's why they use fear to manipulate individuals, because they know these are powerful tools to bend their will to conform to their ideas. And here I'm telling you that, here, you don't have to conform to anyone's ideas. You seek out the ideas that are not just relevant, but the ones that uplift you as an individual and allow for you to find the greatest expression of yourself as an individual. And then, like, could you imagine? Here's the thing: you can't even begin to imagine a world made up of individuals who are self-realized or self-actualized, as Maslow put it, right? The kind of society that would spring out of general membership like that wouldn't look like this. Wouldn't look like the one that you're currently experiencing. It would have to be something else. This society as we live in it, look at the vulture.
Oh, wow.
This society as we live in it makes us perfectly suited to live in this society. So it supports and perpetuates this society, this house of cards. We hold the house of cards up.
Yeah, and what a revolution you could have if you go, oh, hey, life's an adventure, a real adventure.
Yeah. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm into radical thinking, but I don't mean radical like extremism. I mean thinking outside the box, right? So, and I'm not interested in violent revolution. There's no value in that. And we're at a point where if you're going to have a revolution or an evolution, it has to be the transformation of every single individual, and not at an institutional level, not from the top down, that every individual decides that that's their purpose. I'm here to transform. To transform into what? Then becomes a question. Well, the highest expression of yourself, whatever that might mean. And then you define what that highest expression is.
Right, a cult will never be able to tell you what your role is in your own life because you're unique to you. You don't even know you.
Right.
That's the lifelong progress. That's the lifelong adventure.
Right. A lifelong adventure of self-discovery. Right. Yeah. So I go, wait. At some point, that's got to sound really appealing. Right. But
it's at least that from that perspective, it at least gives you the entire area that you can use metaphors, and it helps so much because you can use specifically, in my life this is when it's beneficial to think about abundance rather than scarcity. Teach a man to fish, they'll continue fishing.
Right. Then now they can look after themselves. So if you feed them, they're only fed for a single day. Yeah. But if you teach them how to do it, now for a lifetime they're able to feed themselves.
Once you have the perspective it's an adventure, all these very simple cultural norms and expressions we've had forever, a lot of them make more sense. So they're meaningful.
Okay, so then perhaps that's really what the takeaway from all of this is, that to seek something meaningful, right? In yourself, by yourself, for yourself, right? So I want to get because even though we've talked a lot about hegemony, I want to actually define it very specifically. So hegemony in itself is the political, economic, or military dominance or control by one state over others, right? So any kind of, whether you're going to characterize them being good or bad, so whether they're, every nation uses hegemony to essentially to influence its general members, right?
For better or worse.
Yeah. So whatever. So it's the idea is hegemony is the ability to use things like either politics, economics, or the military over the general population, right? Cultural hegemony is a concept developed by Antonio Gramsci. I hope I said that right. Refers to the dominance of ruling classes, worldview, and values, which are then presented as natural and accepted norms of society, often through cultural institutions like media and education. So you have it's a hierarchy, you have that small minority at the top of the hierarchy, dictating cultural and societal norms to the rest of the population, right? So think about the way the educational institution, like the schedule of an average educational institution, which was developed in the as a result of the Industrial Revolution, because now you had factories to employ people, so you had to condition the children to like that, you know, you'd have an 8-hour workday with a break in the morning, a break for lunch, and a break in mid-afternoon, and that was to adapt them to you know, the schedule of meeting the demands of any kind of factory. So manufacturing, or the need for manufacturing, you know, dictated at least the structure of education, and again, all for those who benefited the most from that structure.
Yeah, what do we want them to know about history? What math are we going to need them to use?
Well, but even just your daily structure, like a
Right.
daily pattern of behavior. You get up at this time. You show up to go to class at this time, or to the factory, or you know, and then mid morning you would have some quick break, and then go back to work. Lunch, you would take another break. Mid afternoon break. End of day. By the end of the day, you're spent, and you just go home and you either drink yourself into oblivion, or you find something else, to act as a form of distraction, so you don't have to face the reality of the trap you're in. You're basically a fucking rat, or a hamster on a wheel.
Yeah, so people give up their free time.
Right. So, and all for the benefit of a small minority, right? Like, again, this kind of thinking robs individuals of their agency. There's no one. It's not empowering. It's disempowering, if anything else, because they seek to not have to face the reality they're confronted with. And I'm like, look, society evolves. We didn't. Canada, any country for that matter, whatever its current state is, it didn't come into existence in that current state. It evolved to this current state. So that means that all of these are still evolving, so they can become something else. So who dictates that? Is it the cultural hegemony? Is it the cultists? Is it the fashionable leader?
Well, everything changes. We're the only people that can change it. Human beings.
Right, but all the human beings at the bottom, and not because you're gonna get pitchforks and torches and go after all the administrators. That's not going to change nothing. You're going to supplant those assholes with another group of assholes who are going to do the very same thing.
Right.
So it requires a real evolution or revolution of the individual, the transformation of the individual. Ultimately, that's what we're talking about. And there's ways to do this, which we're going to explore in depth, not today, but in other episodes. We'll look at methodologies that you can apply, and maybe with the ultimate goal of, like, for maybe just, even if it's a small few, to make them feel more satisfied and better about themselves. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm not trying to change the world. I don't care. I'm only sharing this because this has been my journey so far.
What was it? Personal evolution, revolution?
Yeah. So again, these are the things that I entertained, the ideas that I thought about, the things that I explored, and basically in the last 2 decades.
Right. Sorry, you go?
Oh, no, go ahead.
The strange thing about cultural hegemony is that in order to question it, you can't be in the mind space or the head space where it is how it is. You have to go, why is it like this? People are typically too busy going, okay, I'm here now. How am I going to react? They don't even think that deeply. They react.
Well, that's true. Most of them react, so they don't pause long enough to reflect on what's occurring, then to choose like the most appropriate course of action, which everyone can do that. It's exercising, practical wisdom, right? But most of us very often would prefer our preferences.
Yeah.
Prejudices or biases, because it's just easier. That's why. What I'm talking about is work, and you suddenly have to ignore all the societal and cultural norms and go, here, those have been part of the problem, right? So again, if we're talking about the revolution, evolution, and transformation of the individual, uh, you can be you can experience transformation at the hands of somebody else who's going to use everything we've talked about today to inform not just your opinions, but it affect your psychology, your biology, and then ultimately your behavior. Or you can do it. Why, given a choice, would you leave it in the hands of somebody else who's the last thing that they're concerned with is what's in your best interest, right?
Right. Especially when somebody's ready to pass the buck, it's always going to be passed on.
So, so I, so I'm, we're kind of like, because I know how popular communism and the Marxist philosophy has become, especially amongst young people, and it speaks to me that they don't understand anything about cultural hegemony, and they don't even understand their own history, because the that philosophy has produced the worst. And it's not that Marxism in itself as a philosophy may be bad, but what it did produce and create was individuals who basically became the worst human rights violators in pursuit of this perfect political ideology, which again, I don't think we need. You need to have an awareness of it, and and we have to sort of think about how maybe restructuring society. Like I said, politicians to me should be nothing more than administrators. They do as dictated by the will of the people, right? But then I don't like democracy because I don't like mob rules, because that's what democracy is. I liked the fact that the U.S. is a constitutional republic, but it doesn't behave like one. It 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 claims to be one, and it uses democracy. So if you can manipulate the lowest common denominator, then you can guarantee whatever your particular ideology, cult, can get into a position of authority and have real world power.
Well, every governing system says we'll do it better, and that's their flag they run with. But the methodology is really important. Like socialism, the way I've heard of it, it sounds nice, but in practice, it's like, how are you going to deal with that?
Canada, even though it's a democracy, it has a lot of socialist values. So the idea of socialism, like, to me, I go, like, why does it have to get reduced to like any kind of political thinking? Hey, you look after your own.
Yeah, like we all agree firefighters are useful, but is there some somebody stealing off the top? Like we want to fund, we want 100% of what we believe in to be funded 100%. We don't want any skimmed off the top.
Well, but look, so when you have a ruling class,
it's happening, yeah.
Right? Because that's the nature of it. It's a hierarchy. And I'm like, so the hierarchy is in the shape of a pyramid. I often wondered what would happen if you inverted the pyramid, and it was the general masses dictating to that small minority. But that, again, that's something for people to consider. But I don't like the idea of the lowest common denominator making decisions on my behalf. It's just as bad as having a small minority of people making decisions on your behalf. I'm like, the only way out is for everybody to become the highest quality human being that they're capable of being. That's the only way out, right? If you're okay with all of this shit and you like all the exploitation that goes on within the course of it, bully for you. But I don't. So I implore those who have greater intelligence here, figure a way out, show us something better. But I guarantee you, whatever they show you will only work as a result of every individual coming into their own.
Right.
right?
Even, I was gonna say, even if you suggest like food's the most important thing, we want everybody to have food. Let's give the governing bodies uh, to like farmers. Like this is their role. All of a
Well,
sudden, that's not good.
well, I would. We're gonna save that conversation
Yeah.
for because I want to do we're gonna do an episode about politics and political ideologies,
Right.
and then what possible alternatives could there be, right? So we'll,
I'm just pointing out, like across the board, whatever you value for a metric, you give those groups the power to govern. All of a sudden, it's going to be only for that group.
right.
You need individual revolutions.
So right. So and again, balance becomes the critical thing. You're seeking balance, or as the Buddhists say, the middle way, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's where the real value is, right? So I see myself as a counter-hegemonist, if that's even a word, or I'm into counter-hegemony,
You break shit.
which refers Gesundheit, refers to the efforts of social movements and political forces that resist hegemonic order and seek to reform or replace it. So I would fall under that same category as a counter-hegemonist, or another way of saying it, an anarchist, but in the classical, under the classical definition, where without rulers, right? Contemporary, if you say anarchy or anarchist, they think that you favor chaos and instability. Couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
Right.
Like I said before, break shit.
Right.
But instead of that, it's reviewing. It's
Yeah,
a process of reviewing.
and yeah, so to sit there and to take a good hard look at ourselves all the time, not some of the time, all the time, and for what purpose? The express purpose of like bettering ourselves, because that's the only way that you can move the ball down the field, by constantly reviewing what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're conducting yourself. So in other language, that would mean being mindful or thoughtful, responsible, right? But largely we're reckless because we only give a shit about ourselves. That's the lowest common denominator, and that's the way they want it, because we're easily at odds with one another. We're easily divided. So then those who represent authority and real power, they can basically get away with virtually anything that they do.
Right. It's all the worst instincts of our human nature.
Right, and I don't want to submit to that stuff.
I think
I want to do great things. Don't you want to do great things?
I think it would at least be easy and revolutionary if people behaved in some of their better interests, because human instinct isn't to burn everything down.
No, and as much as selfish as we may appear to be, to me, that's a part and part, a function of what we are, but more a conditioned response.
Right.
Right? So if you can train people to be selfish, then you as a person can train yourself not to be selfish.
We're a super nurturing species. Like,
Well,
we have long
as much as self-interested as we are,
yeah.
that capacity, we also have a capacity, like you say, where we're nurturing. We understand the value of working together. So ultimately, it's this, by us seeking individually the highest expression of ourselves, that would produce the greatest collaboration amongst individuals, right? That we would do astounding things. And I'm more interested by the idea that we're capable of doing astounding things. And because, again, the one thing the last 6,000 years of history has demonstrated, that we can accomplish amazing things. We can do amazing things. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. So then I live my life in accordance with that. Right? So, and then I never intended to walk down this road. It's just the road that I'm on, and I don't resist it, because I don't want to I don't want to be like everyone else. And so I barely recognize the fact that I'm a Canadian. Like, sorry to say. I mean, and for any of the naysayers out there, fuck you. Stop talking like there's an alternative to any of this. The only alternative to all the fucking stupidity that's arisen in the last 100 years is the individual taking agency and assuming responsibility for themselves and then finding the highest expression of themselves. That's the next revolution. Evolution. Transformation. Okay. Can I get a time check?
We're at 1 hour, 40 minutes.
Okay, I think this is a perfect time to bring this episode to a close. All right. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
I'm thinking about this behavior that we get from being humans, and we ignore that it's such an important thing to review. Like our biases, what stimulus.
But personally, like you don't need somebody telling you.
No, I understand.
It's you reflecting on you.
No, I understand. This is part of it. So if you look at how long it takes us to, produce a kid, raise it, and then let it out into the wild, a lot longer than other social animals.
Yeah.
We are one of the most social animals out there, if not the.
And we're going to talk about education too, in terms of like how we're going to unleash our youth onto the world. Right.
Right, but we have without any question of a doubt, like one of the most interactive species, like with each other. Sorry about that.
Yeah, because we're entirely social. We
the behavior should be obvious, but the obvious behaviors to be nurturing this and that can also be pimped out. Like the awareness is very important in this conversation.
Well, I think it's ubiquitous that as individuals we need to have a constant awareness of what we are, who we are, how we're interacting with each other, that kind of awareness. But here's the thing, if you condition to that end, you'll do it without any effort. Initially it might seem like a labor to be able to do it, but eventually once you establish the pattern of behavior through consistency and repetition, then it becomes the new default.
Yeah, like gratitude being the default would be amazing.
It'd be astounding. It would produce amazing human beings.
It's 100% counter to cults.
Right.
Too.
Right.
Like you got to be grateful, but that doesn't mean you idolize or.
Right, and you don't favor anything. You go here. I want to weigh the evidence, and whatever has the most evidence, that's the direction I'm gonna tend to lean towards.
That's also behavioral therapy in like the most broad stroke.
Right. So then maybe in the pursuit of that, you'll see the alleviation of like psychological issues and stress and anxiety. Those become things of the past. Like it's not that they won't exist, but they'll be it'll be in very small doses and very manageable for the average person.
Right.
So then we won't have like. If you doubt me at all, think about how much mental health issues are on the rise.
Right.
Obesity, like this is the result of people out of control who don't know what they're doing and are purposeless. They're like a ship at sea without a rudder.
Yeah, it's very important. The problems don't get smaller, but you have the capability to become bigger, stronger, however you want to describe it.
Isn't that fantastic?
I mean, it's interesting being adaptable.
It's one of our greatest qualities. All right, so I think I'm gonna close this. I think that was a nice way to cap the episode. So in closing, I'd like to say, question everything, including yourself, especially yourself. Seek balance, seek knowledge, seek understanding. Become a renegade, individualist, humanist, critical, objective thinker. Thank you for your time.